All right. We ready to, oh, look, there's you can't look, but my no video thing has a little thumb in the corner of it, even though I'm not actually holding anything up. That's funny. All right. 1, 2, 3. Hello. Surprise, everyone. Welcome to the Sun Dragon Happens to Be Side by Side show again.
The Dear Becky and Lizzie edition.
So yesterday when we filmed, we had all these hopes and dreams of doing this one at the shop, because yesterday, you know, going for a few hours, we'll be in tomorrow because it's raining and warm, and plans changed. Plans changed. I'm changing my camera to be hopefully closer to the same size as you. Okay. This is my version of fiddling with my hair. Here we go. So I was driving into the shop yesterday and I was like, I shouldn't have come in. I shouldn't have come in. I shouldn't have come in. Because some of it was a little sketch. And I counted on and I was like, this is going to be, because most of the hard spots to get in on the way in, I was going downhill, like curvy and steep, but I was going downhill so I could mostly control it. Never felt out of control in my car on the way in. I will say that. But I was going, I have to come home through this. And that means going uphill. In icy, maybe slushy, who knows what's going to be happening by the time I come home conditions. And this isn't like little hills. This is like hills with curves, and you just have to like. So I got a little stressed when we left the shop. You might have noticed this. Because I took some packages to the post office. We got 8 packages out. I forgot to look before we came on air for how many packages we have so far. We got 8 of them done. Yeah. And out. So you'll either be, those of you who ordered with our sale, you'll either be getting a notification, or if you don't, you're gonna have to wait till next week, probably. So, because driving home, then I had to go to the grocery store, and here's one of the benefits of going to the grocery store. I got the creamer I like. They had it back in stock at the grocery store. So my coffee tastes normal again. That was a problem. I probably have enough coffee for like 1, maybe 2 days if I ration. And then I'm going to have to start drinking tea, and I'll survive. Especially if I'm not going to the shop. I don't need to be like, Fergie, you know, but so,
and today's our last day of filming until next week. So you know,
I'm only mildly perky right now because I'm still drinking my coffee, but y'all don't need to worry about how perky my face looks until Tuesday, which is hopefully when we're going to be back in the shop. Because driving home, I wanted to get home before the sun went down, and the sun was like, it was one of those like horror movies where it's like when the sun sets, the vampires come out. So you're trying to get home, and the sun is creeping lower in the sky. That's how I felt driving home. And the very first, your entrance into Conacy, the very first hill there, I was reading all these posts later, by the way, that most people are actually going to East Fork Gate. But then it's a longer drive that I hope doesn't have nastiness, although it might be more downhill.
There are still big hills going that way.
They're hopefully not as steep, but I bet when I'm on them, I'd be like, these are just as steep. The very first hill is like like, so I saw the slush tracks or snow tracks, and I'm like, okay, most people to make it up the hill had to kind of go into the other lane and come back, and I made it up. It was one of those, if someone was coming down, there would have been a problem. There would have been a major problem. I counted each like obstacle of slushy snow. Sometimes it was melted like slush, and sometimes it was still just ice. As I went over it and passed it, and I'm like, obstacle number 1, obstacle number 2. There were 6 spots, some smaller than others, but 6 spots where I was like, breathe your way through. You can do this. You have driven in the snow before. But knowing my car, there were 2 spots where the little idiot light that's like, hey, you're having trouble controlling your car, came on. I was still kind of, I was sashaying with it. I was doing just fine. But there were 2 times the light started flickering. That is like, it's your car with the little, what our roads look like under it. Zoop.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know. Yeah, I was talking to my car. I know I am not completely in control right now. Stick with me. So when I got home, I called up Liz and I'm like, yeah, we're not going to the shop tomorrow. Mm-mm.
Well, and like looking at the weather today, we're getting a little bit of rain now, and we hit our high for the day about an hour ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only going to get colder and colder and colder.
Yeah, it didn't freeze. It's not like most nights where there's black ice this morning because it froze. It hasn't frozen yet. But I also don't think that the roads have gotten any better. There is a chance that the plows came through overnight while it was still relatively warm, and some of that slushy stuff is gone now. But some of that slushy stuff was not slush. It was still hard packed snow and ice.
Yeah.
And why they wouldn't have cleared it out yesterday during the day, that would have been the time to do it. And my drive home proved to me that they hadn't done it. So I'm not taking chances, because when I left the house yesterday, I was like, well, my little side street actually looks pretty good. So that must mean that the rest of it, the main roads in Conisty, are pretty good. No, it's not what it meant at all. I forgot. There's parts where the sun doesn't shine. And if a car's gone over it before the plow got there, it's packed solid. So, okay, enough of me going on and on about like the craziness around here, unless I like hike out like the day after tomorrow, like hike out to the main road to make sure it's clear before I head out. We're not going anywhere. I feel bad because we did have a couple customers in the shop yesterday, so that was great. Some people who were like, you might not have been here, what? And I'm going, did you see there's no parking spots on Broad Street because they're all covered in snow?
In the parking lot I parked in when I got there at noon 15, noon 30, it was completely covered in slushy ice and like a raging river of water underneath. And
the temperatures rose.
Yeah. Fortunately, the sun shone on it. And the only part I had to walk through that was nasty was between the street. And then you go up on, you're on asphalt for a little bit. And then to get in my car, I had to go through the slushy stuff because that was still more than, but also Jordan Street never cleared up because the sun never shone on it.
No, that's the thing about here. The philosophy of wait for it to melt. But then when the sun doesn't actually hit it, it doesn't melt. I have mohair stuck to my feet on the floor here. I'm going to try to knit in a second. Here, let me try to, I'm going to try to knit like Liz as we're answering our questions. When I got to my lot, my parking spot wasn't free, but the one next to it was. So I took someone else's spot. But by the time I left, they had gone out with like, the guy who helps out at our building had one of those like blades to cut through the ice, basically, to try to free up spots and stuff. So we recommend, if you live in the area, just don't go out right now. Just hunker down. Our sale, for those of you who we're looking out the window because you don't live near us going, it's fine outside where I live, you still get to benefit from a 20% off sale with the code IZZYSNOW, because we'll keep that going as long as we are stuck here at home or choosing to be safe here at home. But that means you need to have a lot of patience on us communicating with you about your order and getting it out to you, because there's a really good chance. Like, I'm playing it day by day, because it could be, if we don't get the crazy weather that was forecast at the beginning of the week for tomorrow, if the roads clear up, like if there's enough sun on things, but I just really don't want to take the chance. I'd rather sit out a few days and see. And that's terrifying for me as a small business owner, to not have the shop open. Like, yes, we have an online shop, but it's worrisome. So I know there's people out there watching this who feel my pain. So, we'll make it through though. But we're being safe and we're staying here at home. And I'm knitting too, Liz. Look at this. I had to work out all these knots, and well, they weren't real knots. They were just mohair sticking to itself. Because I've been showing off the yarn at the shop when the weather was good, and kept pulling mohair out of my yarnet, which keeps my mohair very well contained. But so today is the Dear Becky and Lizzie edition, which is good because there's only so much progress that we've made on anything, because we actually went to the shop yesterday. Like, I did this last night, but that's it. So my ZickZack is looking kind of fun and getting all bright and fiery and stuff. But that is not something I can knit on and have a discussion with you about people's questions. So I have very plain knitting in front of me. Yep.
Okay. We still haven't introduced ourselves. I did say it's the Dear Becky and Lizzie edition, but other than that,
so, anyone who's watching for the first time, who's who?
Yeah.
I'm Rebecca. Today I'm Becky, apparently. Just for purposes of our Dear Abby-esque edition, I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. And we are not downtown because of the crazy snow. And there are all these people online who are like, I haven't seen a plow in 5 days. This is stupid. When I was a kid, everything was just plowed. It's like there's so many other things going on right now. It's really rough, and this is a rough storm. Who are you?
I'm Liz, or Lizzie for today. I'm the minion at Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in Brevard, North Carolina.
Thank you for keeping track of stuff like this, Liz, because I'm just like, people know who we are, right? Maybe, I don't know. We're not that famous. Okay, so I'm trying to have my knitting up where people can see it, but the weight of it is pulling it down into my lap. So, this is better. I'm gonna like lean on the side of my desk here.
So
we have like three questions that we're gonna do our best with today, right? We might not get through everything on all of them, but we'll do our best. So go ahead, Liz.
So, and I figured out how to blow it up so it doesn't look like I need glasses.
This is for earlier, like, what is the question? You can still do that. It'd be entertaining. Totally.
It might be, but you know.
Okay. So, oh, well, here's the backstory on this. So when we film at the shop, Liz reads the questions off of her phone, the email on her phone. She's filming right now. She is in the Zoom meeting on her phone. You realize the answer to that could be to be in the Zoom meeting on your iPad.
I don't have Zoom on my iPad. And I don't remember my password to get into Zoom on my iPad.
I was going to say, it sounds like a personal problem. But
it is.
But the other thing about that is, I don't know, depending on the operating system you have, sometimes all the Apple things share. So you could share your password, but I digress. She figured out a solution. She has the questions on her iPad. Go ahead, Liz.
I was going to handwrite them down. Okay.
We would have been filming it too.
I know. Dear Becky and Lizzie, dear knitterly friends, how do you feel about knitting during movies, concerts, church services, and the like? Sincerely, fluffy, fibery friend in Florida.
Oh, I love all the alliteration on that one. That's fantastic. I was mentioning when Liz said, here's some questions that are coming up. I meant from my point of view, it depends on the occasion. There are nuances to all of those things she just listed. You were saying, what were you saying, Liz, about all of those? You have done what with all of those?
I have knit or crocheted or spun for all of those. Depending on the movie or the concert, I might just have it to do before it starts, because you get wrapped up in the movie or the concert kind of thing. Church services, like in Colorado, I used to crochet during church services, but it was me and someone else. I wasn't the only one, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. But meetings I will, because it keeps my hands busy and I can pay attention more.
I really find for all of these, it depends on the vibe I'm getting from the people around me too. If it's a public space, it really depends on if someone else is going to be distracted by it. For me, for some people, they may not care. They may be like, if you're distracted, that is your problem. But for me, a lot, like in a movie, I get really annoyed when people are talking around me or on their phone around me in a movie. So by that same token, if I'm knitting and I know it's making noise, it depends, sometimes it depends on the needles, depends on what you're doing. If I know that it's distracting people around me, I may not do it. Beforehand, I took my knitting to Hamilton when I saw it down in Greenville. And up until the moment the show started, I was killing time because we went super early, because that's one of the last times things were shut down by a snowstorm. and we wanted to make sure we got there. And I was also super nervous and excited, and it was a way to kill time. But once the show started, it was like putting it away.
Yeah.
That's so I could focus on the show too. But I find that like I'll do things like you're saying before a concert starts, but maybe not during, because I'll get side eye from people. Like a church service, it totally depends on the policies of the worship service that you're in. And again, if it's going to distract the people around you, if they're going to think you're being disrespectful, I probably wouldn't. Like I have knit my way through basketball games and baseball games and every like in-person stuff. I have no problem with that at all, because everybody's doing everything at sporting events type of thing. I have let kids knit in my classes before when I was a teacher, if it kept them focused and didn't distract their neighbors. I drew the line at someone folding origami in class because it was noisy. But I have also survived many a teacher's meeting because I was knitting. And other people were doing it too. Like that was another, like, people around me. I wasn't the only person doing it. So that's my thing about public events. If you can be present with the other people you're supposed to be present with at a public event, like if it's something where you're supposed to be socializing and you're able to socialize while knitting, I don't see a problem with it. Like a meeting, like I could still contribute to the meeting and it helped keep me focused. If I went to a party and brought my knitting, which I have done, but that is because I was in a toxic relationship and I didn't realize that's how I was surviving my toxic relationship. If I went to a party and knit in the corner, didn't talk to anybody, it's like, why go to the party in some ways? But if you're like knit night, you know, you bring your knitting and you chat with people and it's great. So yeah. I really think it depends on the venue and other people. If you are respectful of other people's attitudes towards it, then just play by the rules, kind of a thing. Like if I was at a church service and everybody was looking at me like that, you're not paying attention or something, even if I was, I might just put it away. So, you know, but I don't know. Anything else to add to that one?
No, I think we covered it.
Yeah, because I mean, knitting and crocheting are both social and solitary activities. And I think it depends on how it fits into the situation, if it might be deemed appropriate or not. And it also depends on in some ways, your I don't care bar in terms of social situations. And sometimes your I don't care bar might be like at the floor, but the social situation might require it to be a little higher. So you got to read the room. Yeah. You often have to read the room. Yeah. So, all right.
Take it with you by all means. Just
yeah, like a security blanket, just in case. You never know. Sometimes when you're stuck in traffic, it's good to have your knitting with you because you're not going anywhere, right? I've seen all kinds of stuff on social media of people being like, on the ferry, so I'm knitting, and I'm waiting for my husband at his doctor's appointment, so I'm knitting. And you know, like
I took knitting to Comic-Con with me because I was like, there's gonna be times we're sitting and I can stay.
I bring my knitting to doctor's appointments just for when I'm waiting. I bring my knitting to all, like, I almost always, I didn't bring it to the shop yesterday because I knew I just wouldn't be touching it.
I did.
But yes, you did have it. It's all good. I just didn't want to be weighed down in the snow. But I pretty much always have a little side bag of knitting with me. So it should be part of your emergency kit. Like for winter driving, you know, extra blankets and you know, emergency flares and some knitting just in case. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we ready for the next one? Because we have a three.
I know. Yeah, let's do the next one.
Okay, next one. Dear Becky and Lizzie, I want to make more sweaters and tops, but my dresser and chest of drawers are both getting full. What is the best way to store wool items? I'm currently putting them in Ziploc bags and squishing out all the air. Is that okay? It definitely gives me a little more space, but even that is filling up. Is there a best practice sort of thing for sorting hand knits? Space deprived.
This is a, I don't know if I have a great answer for this personally, because squishing the air out in Ziploc bags, in theory, that should be fine. The whole space bags, the space savers, everything should fluff back up. Like you can put quilts, you can put everything in and vacuum all the air out and compress it down. Because some people are like, oh no, it's gonna flatten my, in theory, for most fibers and most things, it should be okay. And it should come right back to life when you let the air back in. Like you are more the expert at that than I am, because you pack up the yarn for everybody and squish it. So
I squish all the yarn. It's soft and squishy. It, you know,
in theory, it should not stay flat when you open up the bag. But in terms of being space deprived, I get it. And I have a whole yarn shop that I can store my stuff at, and like there's not enough space to hang up all my stuff to put on display. So I have a lot of things folded on shelves in the shop, and that means some people never see it when they come into the shop. And I have maybe one chest of drawers here at home that have old knits in them, but I have a lot of boxes and like plastic containers full of old knitting projects that are just taking up space. And luckily, since I'm by myself, that's okay if it's a hot mess. So
I would say that if you have a space under the bed, they make all those little plastic rolly things that you could put like knits that you're not wearing in their Ziploc bags so they don't get sad. But you could, you know, there's always more space sometimes. I have a very extensive floor closet and back of the chair closet at the house, and then at the shop. Like my mom's like, well, Liz, where do you put your sweaters? And I'm like, on the back of the chair as I'm walking in and out the house. Like that way I can just grab one and go.
And honestly, that's what we do at the shop too. They're all hanging all over the chairs and everything. So so anyway.
Fine. The space is always an issue for both unfinished projects. One of our knitters said, just get more shelves. Like when she sent me a TikTok video of where do you put all of your unfinished projects? Just find more shelves.
And we have a knitter who regularly goes through all her projects and donates some because she's run out of space and she just thinks she doesn't wear anymore. So she donates them to local thrift stores and places that benefit good causes and stuff like that. So that's always an option too. I do recommend folding up your knits instead of hanging them because they will stretch out over time. I don't recommend hanging them in a closet. If you anything, get the hanger for your closet that has the plastic like things to line stuff up and fold things up and put them in your closet rather than hanging them this way because they can stretch out over time. So it helps to have them horizontal rather than vertical, if that makes sense. Anyway, I left the window open in here. As we get on to our last question, I left the window open in here for morning meditation to distract the cat because there were like rain noises outside. And I forgot to shut it until just before filming, so it's a little chilly in here. All right, 11, just about 11:20. Okay. In terms of how much more time we want to give ourselves. So we have one more question that has many parts to it that we're going to tackle what we can. So what do you got, Liz?
Dear Becky and Lizzie, can you discuss different weights and types of yarn? What do the names mean? What is the continuum between lightest, thinnest to heaviest, thickest? What size needles are typical for each weight? What projects are common for each weight? Thank you, Knitting Newbie.
Okay, so what?
I was gonna say, I'm gonna give the weights in order. So the continuum from thinnest to thickest, and then we can go from
and I don't think I'm gonna have time to like edit in and put like words underneath of what we're saying. So but this is like I'd love to make it like one of my tips and tricks, excuse me, to make it as explicit as possible, but those take so long to edit, and oh my gosh, And but no, I think that's absolutely the way to go. And we've probably talked about this before, but it bears repeating, and we'll do what we can. We may not be able to give a full answer here, but we'll do what we can.
And once again, it's a general overview, our ideas, and
people may agree or disagree with us. Yes. So.
Yeah. So
wait, before you start. This is going to be mainly for US classifications of weights of yarn. And by weight, we mean thickness. Weight is for some people, it's like heavy. What? It's not like super bulky, which we'll talk about in a second, is you can't pick it up off the floor. But there's ways to think about I think we mentioned before, we're talking about weight. Liz is going to start going through the categories. A lot of yarn company, and I'm getting grounded here for a second, but in the UK, they might talk about 4-ply and 8-ply and other things. We're not talking about, there's some correlations, but we're not trying to make that clear right now. We're just talking about what you'll see on US patterns and US ball bands and things like that. And a lot of the US companies, I used to do this warm-up exercise with my intro knitting, intro crochet people of helping you figure this out and see this. We're not going to do that here. We're stuck at home. But most US packages of yarn come in either 50 grams or 100 grams. So it's not like something that is a heavier weight, there's more grammage. They'll all be let's say 100 grams is what a lot of them come as. But how much yardage fits into those 100 grams will depend on how thin or thick it is. So that's kind of what weight applies to. So go ahead, Liz.
We have cobweb, which is the thinnest. It's like silk mohair.
Even mohair tends to be classified, which is this really thin, right? Yeah. Tends to be classified as lace, but not cobweb. Cobweb is like itty bitty.
Yeah, anyway. But it's classified a little thicker because of the halo.
Yeah.
Then you have lace.
Okay, and lace, as Liz is heading into this category, some ball bands, I don't know if this one does. Some ball bands will actually have number, like these little what looks like a skein of yarn with a ball band around it with a number inside it. And we're almost heading into when those numbers start, because this is the number 1 and they call it super fine. But Liz is talking about lace weight, which is thinner than this. So go
ahead. Lace weight, fingering weight, which is number 1.
Fingering weight will often be called a number 1. Not all ball bands use that little symbol though. Not all of them use that. Some of them use other ways of classifying, and that's about, again, it's about yardage for 100 grams, like lace weight. And here's the crazy thing that makes this complicated to help you everybody make sense of it, is there's a range of, it's not like all lace weights are exactly the same and all fingering weights are exactly the same. So lace weight, often you'll see something that's in the area of 800 yards sometimes for 100 grams. So a lot of yardage. So we went cobweb, then lace weight. Now Liz mentioned fingering weight, right? Mm-hmm. And pet peeve. And if you call it this, I will still smile and nod at you. It's not fingerling, it's fingering. Fingering, it's I guess we don't know where all these names came from, but maybe it's because it, catch it up in your fingers. It's thin, I don't know. But fingering weight is often somewhat synonymous with sock weight, because a lot of socks are made out of this thinner weight yarn. But fingering, I'm wondering, Liz, if as we're going through the weights, we should talk about needles and stuff too, rather than circle back.
Okay.
I'm kind of because I almost want to talk about things you could make out of this. So maybe we could do it all together.
Okay.
And really thin stuff, again, for a new knitter, really thin stuff to talk about needles and those things, and maybe just weight or experiment. A lot of this stuff is experiment on your own, right? So the range where most yarn companies and like some guild out there probably put out these numbers, start numbering. We're in number 1 right now when we hit the fingering weight or the sock weight, what they call with the words under it, super fine. Tends to be 400 to like 450 or so, or right, yards per skein.
437 is a pretty standard yardage.
Because it's 400 meters. So especially companies using metric system.
Yep.
So what I'm doing my ZickZack out of, this sweater that I am doing right now is actually mohair and a strand of fingering weight Cascade Heritage silk held together, which takes it to another weight category, which, you know, that's down the road. But so 400 meters or about 437, 440 yards is pretty classic for yardage on fingering weight. And I mean, the needle question is a relative thing. Like the ball bands for fingering weight will often tell you to use between a US 1 to US 3 kind of on it. A lot of people make like for projects for this, socks, why it's called sock weight. Although not all sock yarns are, not all fingering weight yarns are sock yarns.
This is my thing. Mm-hmm. Fingering sock content. Sock, anybody that says I want your sock yarn, you're looking for the content, not the weight, because they make sock content in a lot of different weights.
Yes, but the same thing of when they're like, I want your baby yarn, and they could mean a certain weight. Like a lot of that falls into another category, but not always.
Yeah, it's
really hard question to answer when someone comes in the shop. I'm like, and they look at me like it's not that difficult, and I'm like, it kind of is.
Kind of is. Fingering weight is the thickness category of most sock content yarns, but not all fingering yarn is sock content. So
and sock yarn usually has hopefully washable wool and a little bit of nylon or something else to give it a little more strength. Like the silk can be a replacement for the nylon, so that your socks will hold up, not wear out as fast, and maybe hold their shape a little better. But that's
my biggest.
Oh yeah. And sometimes we're going to totally ramble. We're trying to be organized, but we're going to ramble. So sometimes how well something holds up has to do with how tight you knit it for socks, not just the content. So there's a lot of variables, and this is getting to this person's question of what should we make out of everything, out of these different weights. There's no given, there's no standard. There's a lot of people who'll be like, well, you should do this out of this weight and this out of that weight. But I have made hats out of sock weight yarn, and like you were just saying, you can make socks out of thicker yarn. You don't have to make socks out of team yarn. If you want them to fit into your shoes, maybe, but
it always depends on the pattern writer, or personal preference as to
personal preference or what you're going to use it for.
Yeah,
right? Like house socks and hiking socks I would make out of thicker yarn.
Yeah.
So if I want them to fit into my dress shoes or my teaching shoes way back when, they need to be thin enough that I'm not uncomfortable in my shoes. So
could also depend on where you live. Like we have a lot of people who would make hats out of fingering weight yarn because they, want a lighter weight hat. But we also have a lot of people who are like, it's cold where I live or what I'm doing, I want a super bulky hat. So there's no real, this is what I do, papillons out of every weight. So there's no perfect thing. Next weight category.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
Before we move on to the next weight category. So you can make socks out of this, and a lot of people do. You can also, there's a lot of shawls, scarves, like I'm doing the ZickZack scarf.
Sweaters.
Fingering weight can be used for a lot of different things. I would say most traditionally, people are making socks and shawls out of it. But yes, you can make sweaters out of fingering weight. You can do a lot with this thinner stuff. Okay, just wanted to say that. Next weight.
Okay, sport weight. classed as a number 2 on the ball band.
Yes, and it probably is fine or something. Like the names for the ball, like those yarn balls with the number in the center of them, they have their own names, and some of them overlap with traditional names that you will see on Ravelry for weights of yarn, and some of them won't. So like they didn't say fingering on that, they said superfine. But yeah, the next thickest weight after fingering is sport. And it's what the other thing I should say is that there's a range within each of these major categories. There's like 7 or 8 major categories that we can talk about today. And there's a range within each of them. And sometimes to help you further hone in and define where it fits in the range is a thing called wraps per inch. And how many times you can wrap the yarn like around your needle, around a ruler, around anything over an inch helps you define how thin or thick it is. And we're not going to talk about specifics of that today. I just want people to know it's out there, and there's a continuum for that too. But that can help put it in one of these categories. If you're like, how, which category should this fit in? You can try wraps per inch and look up a chart online that tells you which category it fits in. But we tend to use, for the most part, the yardage per 100 grams helps us classify it. But then the fiber content can totally change that. Like cotton is heavier especially when it's twisted up tight. So you won't get as much yardage out of like a middleweight cotton as you will out of a middleweight wool. So it gets weird, and something could look like it's one thickness, but be classified as another because they're expecting it to fluff. And it's just, so I don't want to get too bogged down in all that, but I want to mention that is the case. So it doesn't mean that what we're saying here is absolutely set in stone. Like I have a yarn that's 400 meters, so it must be fingering weight. We have a yarn in the shop that is that much yardage, meterage, but it's considered sport weight. So
we tend to also follow what sometimes the designer, the manufacturer says it is.
Yeah.
Although there's some give in there. Some of our yarns like Patagonia and Alba, they're classed as a thicker yarn, but they have yardage and thinness of a sport weight. So
yeah. My yarn was getting caught in the rollies of my chair, so I'm sorry.
Not good.
Okay, sport weight. If we want to have any hope of wrapping up remotely within like an hour's worth of filming, sport weight is the next category up, and I'm having such a hard time with my floofy. And for the most part, that's going to be in the like 300 something yards per skein, per 100 gram skein. It's actually gotten very, very popular in terms of making like hats and cowls and sweaters and everything out of it. It's not one of the more commonly bandied about weights of yarn, but I think people like it because it's not like teeny tiny, but it's still lightweight. Like if you think about if you make a sweater out of it, it will be lighter weight. I want to say for a lot of sport weight, we're talking about 4s and 5s for needles for the traditional, like what it'll say on the ball band to use with it. But there's also always the caveat, like Liz goes bigger with needles on everything. Just because it says you need to knit it with a 4 or a 5 doesn't mean you have to. You can knit it with a 9 and you're fine. You're just going to have bigger stitches. It all depends on if you have to hit gauge for a pattern or if you're just like a shawl. If it's bigger, that's great. It just might use more yarn. So we have some people making baby blankets out of sport weight. There are a lot of sweater patterns written, like it's becoming more popular, and we don't have the biggest sport weight section in our shop. So I'm often bemoaning that, but you can't fit everything in the shop. So do you want to say anything else about sport weight, Liz?
I find that sport weight can be interchangeable a lot depending on your needle size. Like if you're mixing yarns, you can interchange it either a little down or a little up. It's kind of
What do you mean by interchange? Do you mean you can
Like,
use it in a fingering weight pattern or a DK weight
if you're
pattern?
using it as a contrast, like in some sweaters or whatever, it's not going to hurt it necessarily to be your contrast yarn on like a fingering weight or a DK weight sweater.
Okay, so if you can pair it with something thinner or thicker than it, and hopefully you'll be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the flavor. Like we have lots of yarns. We're like, okay, this is this weight. You can pair it with either side. Like
it might play well with another yarn that's
play well with
slightly different thickness.
Yeah,
potentially. Yeah. The other thing we're not talking about right now is the general gauge you get with each of these weights of yarn, because that gets complicated too. That's like on the ball band, it will list a gauge and it'll be like the average knitter using this size needle should get this many stitches per inch. But not all of us are average knitters. We are tighter or looser than the average. And, or, someone says they're an on gauge knitter. That means they should be able to pick up the needles it says on the ball band and knit that many stitches per inch. But that gets super complicated, especially as a new knitter. I wouldn't stress about that. And if you need to make something that fits, then we have that conversation about gauge. But this is more just talking about thicknesses of yarn. So are we ready to, well, and ready. Honestly, just like I don't really know where fingering came from. I don't know where the sport weight name came from. If someone knows, they can like let us know. We know where some of these names kind of came from, but sport weight, again, why something is considered sporty or sport, we don't know. Is it used when people made athletic gear at one point? Who knows? We don't know. So that's just what it tends to be called. So yeah. And you know a lot of random crap, Liz, but you don't know that.
I know a lot of random crap.
We could look it up at some point, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next category is DK or double knitting.
Yeah, it stands for double knitting. Go ahead.
Which came from holding 2 strands of fingering weight together.
Which is 2 strands of this stuff.
So. Yeah.
And it's not, because there's also a knitting technique called double knitting, and it's not the same. That is a version of changing colors and doing a pattern. Double knitting for weights of yarn is really, it's 2 strands, it's double the thickness of a classic fingering weight. Doesn't mean that every fingering weight that you can buy in the market today, if you hold double, will equal a DK weight yarn, which is frustrating. But for the most part, I find yardage on this is probably about 250 yards, but it could be more. Like we have some in the shop that are classified as DK that have over 300 yards per 100 grams. So there's a real range in terms of what we have in the shop. There's a real range, and what, light DK versus heavy DK. Again, that like weight nomenclature really means thin versus thick. So like we have fiber spates in the shop, which is a heavy DK, which I've used for the next weight up of patterns, and it's fine. And we have Alba and Juniper Moon Patagonia at the shop that are thin enough. They're called DK, but they're thin enough. If you wanted to use them for a sport weight pattern, you probably could. So needles for that tends to be in the US 6 category for the most part. Like what you'll see on ball bands might be a 5, but tends to be and sometimes a 7. It's kind of in that range. But that's DK. And like this sweater that I'm knitting right now, I am holding a mohair, which is fluffy, and I'm holding a fingering weight together, and the pattern has a gauge and like you could just use a single strand of DK weight yarn for this pattern. It's the No Frills Sweater by PetiteKnit, and you probably would be fine. So it's super popular, I find, for patterns and things, because it's not like middleweight yarn, which we're about to hit next, but it's not really teeny tiny. So sport and DK tend to fight with each other with like pattern writers of what is the most hip and in thing to be knitting, is what I find. So, but what you can make out of it, I mean, everything. Like, I don't feel like there's only one thing. There's a lot of patterns written for DK weight yarn, hats, there's a lot of everything. DK tends to be the category when someone comes in saying they want baby yarn.
Yes.
The pattern is probably calling for DK weight yarn. There's a lot of baby yarn for me more is about fiber content than a weight. But when someone comes in and says they need baby yarn, the first place we take them is the DK weight section, because that's probably what they're looking for. But then they say no, and it's the unspoken stupid, I need bulky weight yarn. But they didn't tell us that because they didn't know that, because they think that the pattern that just says baby yarn is a universal thing, and it's kind of not. So and so we just try to go with a lot of grace on that and help them out, because we're not speaking the same language yet. We have to kind of come at it from a different angle to help people out shopping for that, because not everyone uses the same language when they're writing a pattern or when they're talking about it online. So yeah. All right. So, and DK tends to have a number 3 if there's a number in that little ball band symbol, if the yarn uses that. Next, we come to the classic number 4, which many people, if they come into the shop and say, I need a 4-ply, I translate that to number 4, because 4-ply in the UK is actually a fingering weight. It gets, but they say 4-ply, but they're actually talking about that number 4 in a ball band, which is, Liz?
It's worsted weight.
Which is a weird word, I know. And that word worsted means a whole bunch of different things.
It comes from Worsted, England, which also has to do with how yarn is spun, how there's like suits, there's counties, there's everything. Worsted in this case is just a yarn weight for middle of the road. Yay.
It's the middle range. Like there's about 6 to 8 numbers on this numbering system, and 4 is right in the middle. And when I say, do you need worsted weight yarn for this pattern? And they look at me like I have 6 heads. I'm like, middle thickness, because it's like what 90, well, before the really chunky trends started, it's what 90% of the yarn at big box stores would be. It's middle thickness. It's like what I'm making my raglan, like most of Ready Set Raglan has patterns that are written for worsted weight. Number 4, it is about 200 to 220 yards per 100 grams, depending on the fiber. Like I said, cotton is only going to have maybe 180 yards. It gets weird. But for wools like Encore, Plymouth Encore, which is a nice, super basic workhorse of a yarn, Cascade 220 actually refers to how many yards per 100 grams it has.
Yep.
It's, hi Kitty, how are we doing? Kitty got bored. It is a lot of things are written for worsted, a lot of sweaters, a lot of scarves. We teach on worsted weight yarn because it's right in the middle. It's a US 8 needle usually. Sometimes you could go thinner or thicker. Okay, thank you. Yes, there we go, Kitty. Yes. It's more often than not, if it's not a super thick, chunky yarn, it's what you're going to find in the big box stores and most available everywhere. So worsted weight it sometimes is my happy place. This sweater, the Easy Eyelet Yoke cardigan, it's written for, I forget if the pattern's actually written for worsted weight, but this is a worsted weight yarn that I used.
My Twilight is worsted weight.
So it's middle of the road. You're going to find a lot of things that are available to you, like basic starter hats. It's great to go on worsted weight yarn. So next, number 5.
Number 5 is either chunky or bulky. Both words are kind of,
yes,
they're switching over to bulky, but chunky.
The word you'll find under the 5 on a ball band will say bulky. I grew up with it being chunky, but now chunky is more used for those super jumbo blankets, and so it gets like Walmart.
It gets confusing.
Chunky. It gets confusing, and bulky is kind of misleading in a way because it's not a whole lot thicker than worsted weight. So when you hear the word bulky, like when I hear the word bulky, I think really big. And when I hear the word chunky, I think just slightly bigger than worsted, but people come into our shop saying we need chunky yarn. And I show them to the stuff that's just slightly thicker than worsted. And they're like, no, I want the stuff I can hand fist knit a blanket with. And I'm like, what? Like, again, we're not speaking the same language. It gets a little complicated. Oh, he totally wants to attack me at some point. So number 5, chunky or bulky, you'll find both languages used depending on who's writing the patterns or indicating on the yarn. It's more like, we have some chunky / bulky, like the Dawson, that's 170 yards per 100 grams.
Yep.
We have some that is 140. We have some that's 100, like cotton will only be 100. So there's a whole big range in there, but it's a little thicker. Usually you're knitting on like a 10 and a half needle. But you can sometimes go thinner and sometimes go thicker, but anywhere from a 10 to an 11 needle for chunky, bulky yarn. And for me, that's better for scarves, for, you know, bigger things that aren't going to be super, super heavy. So you're still going to see sweaters written for this yarn. But I'm a big fan of hats and scarves and things that will go quickly. And it's actually beneficial if they're heavier, kind of a thing. So blankets will be done a lot faster. We have a yarn called Universal Yarns Major. That's 100% acrylic. So it's really great for baby blankets. That's the other place we take people for baby stuff in the shop. If you want it done faster, because it's probably close to as thick as 2 DKs held together. We're getting close to that, yep. Right? And some people will be like, well, can I hold two of one yarn together and get to another weight? In theory, if you hold 2 DKs together, you get to chunky. But if the pattern's written for a lighter chunky yarn, you might be going too thick. I've had that happen.
And it depends on what the fluff factor is, because in theory, 2 fingering equal a DK, but technically mohair is thinner than fingering, but it needs fluff.
But it fluffs, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that
a lot of rules
throws life crazy.
A lot of rules aren't rules anymore because they're not going to work in every situation. All right, so we should wrap up soon. So let's get at least to the end of the major numbering scale. Number 6 is, Liz?
Is super bulky.
Is super bulky, and that's one of our happy places too. The chunky sweater I was wearing on Tuesday is made out of super bulky yarn. And that, as the name implies, is a lot thicker. Like between chunky and or bulky and super bulky, I feel like there's a kind of a big jump for most yarns. It gets there's not a lot of super in between. It depends on the content.
Shop, in our shop, yardages range between 87 yards and 50 yards per 100 grams of super bulky. We do have one that's an outlier, but it's a chainette. So
the chainette is lighter, so you can get more yardage out of it. So it's like over 100 yards, but it's still thick. It will fluff up. It's like a down jacket with air in the center. So those are good. Like I've made hats out of those. I've made a sweater. I was wearing it on Tuesday. I wouldn't recommend everybody make a sweater out of super bulky. A lot of people will knit up quick Afghans if it gets expensive, regardless if it's a thick or a thin yarn. You're still going to need a lot of yarn to make an Afghan, so it's the cost is going to add up. But it's a number 6. Knitting needles for those can go anywhere from an 11 to a 17, 19. More often than not, 15 is the happy place for a super bulky yarn. And our encore version of super bulky called Mega is 64 yards per 100 grams. The Chill, some of the single ply super fluffy chunky yarn is only 50 grams. Mamacha, like we have some yarns in the shop that are really pretty, and you're only going to get 50 grams out of 100 yards. 50 yards out of 100 grams. So you're going to rip through it really fast.
Super bulky and Baby Butts and Unicorn Kisses, also called Puyu. Those 2 are just under 80 yards. Like
but the Ba also is on the thinner end of super bulky. Like It's
Yeah.
weird. So they don't all behave the same.
No.
But they're all fun, so cowls, things like that can be really fun. Sometimes you can get a cowl out of one skein, sometimes you need two. It really depends. Then there are the new categories that in recent years of like jumbo, which could be either called a 7 or an 8, depending on who's making the label, because there's not a ton out there. And the chunky, what people are hand making blankets out of is even thicker than that. But often the jumbo yarns, you'll need like after a size 19 needle, they jump to like 35 and 50 in terms of US sizes, and they get huge. And not a whole lot of yarn shops carry the super bulky, like the jumbo yarn, the super, super bulky yarn. And people come in sometimes wanting a super bulky cotton. We don't have anything above a chunky and a cotton because it's just so heavy and hard to make. And it gets a little complicated. So if someone has a wool allergy, we don't have many options if you want to go super thick on the yarn. One category we kind of jumped over because it's a weird category is something called Aran. And I realized that as we're going, like for some people, it doesn't have a number on that number system. For some people, it's like a heavy worsted weight. So it goes between like some patterns on Ravelry that say you need Aran weight for this. They want something that kind of fits right between worsted and chunky or bulky. So we don't really have a category in the shop that's dedicated to Aran weight, if that is the definition of it. But
in my research, Aran and worsted weight are interchangeable. Aran is what the British use
in the UK.
In theory.
So for some people it's interchangeable. For some people they do mean heavier than worsted. It's really weird.
It is weird in the fact that people are trying to make it its own category, but I think historically it is the same as worsted weight. But people assume because it's got a different name that it needs its own weight category.
Mm-hmm.
I'd pick the heavier end of worsted, so the 200 grams or 200 yards per 100 grams instead of the 220. But let's be real, you can knit it on the same needles you would use for worsted. So if it's not going to or go up to chunky.
We do have people who come into the shop who are like, no, but it says Aran. And we show them for the worsted weight and they're like, but it says Aran. It's like,
because
it's tough. And sometimes they do, like sometimes we point people to the Dawson or to things that are on the lighter end of chunky. I don't know. It's just, the sad part about it is it's not set in stone. No. And it's not all the same thickness. It's just general ranges. So,
and we have also noticed that different manufacturers of yarn will class their yarn in a certain weight category. And that may or may not.
Yeah, and we think they're ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, tend to go, okay, what does this yarn do? Does it fluff? If it doesn't fluff, then, it's probably thinner or thicker than what they classed it as. And, so there's lots of questions,
and some yarn companies like Pearl Soho makes lovely yarn, but we found on the whole, their classifications for their yarn tends to run thinner than other yarns classified in the same weight category. So there's issues, and sometimes we go by yardage and fiber content. There's a whole like magical formula that it's more art than science that we have to use to try to help someone find a yarn that is going to work based on the pattern they bring in. So I hope that helps start the conversation for that person. We've been going on for over half an hour on that, so it's probably time to wrap up for today. This is the danger of filming from home when we don't have to be at the shop, is we could go on all day. And I'm sure there's people at home who would be like, that's awesome, keep going. But no, there's other people who tuned out like 45 minutes ago. So, I think we took a little break. We're gonna see a little like shimmy happen in the middle there. We both took a little break for just a second in the middle of filming. I think we went up another subscriber when that happened, Liz. Like, I think we're at 698 right now, and it fluctuates. So it fluctuates. So you go look right now, you watching, you might see the number lower. But we're just super excited about that. If we hit 700 during our hiatus from the shop, we're probably going to hold on to the sale until we get back. So I mean, we'll figure that out. But the next time we film, hopefully we'll be back in the shop and the other sale will be over. But if we hit 700 subscribers and it's steady, like not wavering right at 700, then we're gonna have another sale for y'all, only for YouTube people. And that, yay! So for now, save with the IZZYSNOW code online because we're stuck at home because of the storm Izzy and the repercussions from Izzy. And it's getting foggy outside again. It's like all spooky outside. But other ways you can hang with us, even though we're stuck at home, we are still gonna have knit night tomorrow night. So join us for virtual sit and stitch Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. with the shop phone number
828-877-3550.
I feel like that's like a good tagline and an ad at this point, you know, like, anyway, it's like the JG Wentworth ads or something. Okay. And then if you want us to wax philosophical on one of these questions and hopefully do it justice, you can mail us a card. Maybe we'll get it next week if we're in the shop. That is Sun Dragon Art and Fiber, 35 South Broad Street, Brevard, North Carolina, 28712. Or you can email, which is the only thing we had right now because we're at home, and you email
Liz at sundragonartandfiber.com.
Please don't email me, email Liz, because if you email me, I will treat it as someone asked me a question, I will email them an answer and move on, because there's too much stuff in my inbox. If you want us to talk about it on camera, got to email Liz. So, because she can keep track of them for me. So yes, on that note, we will wrap up this lengthy but hopefully fun answering questions. I don't think I got too much knitting done, and I just made a face a couple minutes ago because of course my stitch holders are coming off. I can't wait to get the knitting barber cords, which we should hopefully be getting soon, because I love my clovers, but you use them on too many projects and sometimes the little stopper doesn't stop, and then I have to put my stuff back on the needle. But to show y'all what I was knitting on today, this is my No Frills Sweater holding color changing mohair with white fingering weight yarn, and making a little bit of progress on that. It'd be great if I could finish another sweater, because Lyrical Knits is doing a Princess Bride knit along at the end of February.
That would be awesome. I'm looking at finishing at least one sweater this weekend.
I would think by the end of February, I should be finished with the Echo Point knit along that we are doing.
Yes.
So I can do the Princess Bride. I think it's a mystery knit along. But if anyone who's been watching knows that, like, oh my gosh, Princess Bride kind of,
it's your thing.
It doesn't rule my life, but there is a quote from Princess Bride for almost every occasion in life. Like, I can make it work. Wait,
we've had whole text threads that were nothing but Princess Bride quotes and
Princess Bride quotes and gifts and
gifts,
or whatever you call them. And so wait, I totally ran over what you were saying. You're going to finish which sweater?
I'm going to try and finish at least one sweater this weekend.
I think you can finish the Thistle one.
Oh, I know I can finish the Thistle one, although it's inches and inches of sleeves.
But you made such progress on the Thistles.
I know. And now I'm in sleeve purgatory, whatever.
Yep. Sleeve Island. You're like, plane, don't leave, don't fly over. I'm here, help. Yeah, okay.
I have though put almost 3/4 of an inch of seat stitch on my Twilight.
Oh, nice. That's the bottom of your torso?
Yep.
Sounds like you're about to hit sleeve.
Hell.
Put in a nasty word there on both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what happens. Stay tuned.
Do have a super bulky sweater that I need to finish, and
are they all at the sleeve point?
My green super bulky cardigan number 5, or cardigan anyway,
I know
that one is, I think I'm still working on the front, but like it's on 19 needles. It's gonna go fast. So,
Well, I need to finally hopefully finish editing the tips and tricks I filmed on Tuesday. It has taken forever because there's other stuff happening in life, but I'm hoping to publish the sleeve separation video today. I'm finally in the, like, anyone who watches my tips and tricks, I've got, I do an introduction, I draw on the whiteboard, and then I do stuff with yarn if it goes to that point. And then I have a wrap up. I'm in the doing stuff with yarn section. It's the whiteboard that takes like a million little cuts and edits and things. And so the doing stuff with yarn section, I just have to speed up when I'm like knitting across my torso. So hopefully that is being published soon today. And then I have so many options. I was gonna bring down the blanket, the wedding blanket for my cousin so I could show it off to y'all. I forgot. I'm not gonna get it right now. But the only time I would be showing it off to y'all would be here at home because it's not traveling to the shop because there's a million balls of yarn involved in it. But who knows? Maybe I could only bring in the balls involved. But once it starts growing in size, I don't know.
Yeah.
Next time we're stuck at home, or I'll show y'all a picture. So
yeah.
All right. Or come to knit night because maybe I'll work on it during a knit night and then I'll actually make progress on it. I can dream.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll let y'all go now and go about your day. And even though we're trapped here at home, I still have a million things to do. One of these trapped at home days, I'm going to actually like relax and knit and sleep. I don't think today's that day, but we'll see. We'll report back to you next week. I hope you all have a great weekend. Come to virtual sit and stitch and save online. And yes, bye.
Like, subscribe, ring the bell, Patreon, all that fun stuff.
Patreon. And if you want to support us monetarily, and subscribe here if you want to support us with just like the thumbs up and the subscribe and no money needed, but you could get a sale. Okay, bye. Where's the button?